What's happening, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Crash Bang Boom podcast. Today's guest is Train drummer, and to clarify, that's the band Train, not that he plays exclusively on cross-country trains, although not a bad gig if that's a thing. Train Cocktail Lounge Band. Sign my ass up for that gig. But in any case, Matt and I get into everything from some of the cooler gigs he's played, his small-town roots, his work with Grace Potter, as well as some of his favorite audio and producer experiences, and a whole lot more. So I hope y'all dig it. Train will also be on tour for the next couple of months on the East and West Coast, so check that out. And lastly, Matt's girlfriend Allison Tavel worked on a documentary where she traced the roots and the stories surrounding the synthesizer her deceased father designed called the Resonator, and along the way talked to some great people and learned more about her father in the process. So it looks like a really cool doc with a great story, so keep your eyes open for that. Crash Bang Boom podcast can be found on iTunes Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Luminary, Google Play, Podbean, and Amazon Music Podcast, to name a few. Feel free to check out any previous 200 plus episodes, give me a like, a subscription, and or a positive review. The support is appreciated. Shout out to my sponsor, New Orleans Record Press. If you're looking to release some vinyl, hit them up at neworleansrecordpress.com. Check out all the electroplating, mastering, design, packaging, and vinyl coloring options, and they got a real-time quote generator to add it all up so you can keep tabs on all that. They also print 12 and 7-inch records in 150 and 180 gram variants. They do small runs of 100 and larger runs up into the thousands. So hit them up, and that's neworleansrecordpress.com. So without further ado, here we go. Matt Musty. Crash, bang, boom.
Crowds go mad with joy.
Yeah! All right, I'm here with Matt Musty, who's the drummer of Train, as well as an LA session guy who also does commercial work and all that goodness. Matt, how's it going, man?
Hey, it's good, man. It's good to see you, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Well, you know, it's the recurring question when I talk to drummers, especially session guys and whatnot, that, you know, 2020 was obviously a strange year with touring being put on pause. But how was it for you, and were you able to continue doing some sessions? Do you have a home setup or a studio set up to where you could do some of that on your own and continue doing it?
It was really interesting. The lead up. I think everyone now remembers their lead up to March 12th or whatever day they kind of officially locked down. But for me, I was out with Train. I always say we had done everything wrong. We had gone to Vail to play a private show, which was the hot spot for a moment. And then we had gone to do a San Francisco show, which was another hot spot. We went and did the Train cruise, which must have been just like a petri dish.
Right.
that was about mid-February. We played Mardi Gras, which was crazy.
I was down there in Mardi Gras. That's wild.
That was the year that someone died in the parade and got hit by the flood. And we were like supposed to go up and like play Soul Sister half an hour later, and it was just kind of odd, you know?
Right.
The whole thing.
Yes.
And then we ended a few of us up in Seattle, and that was March 10th, 11th, and then on the 12th, Pat was like, "Hey, man, the National Guard's coming in. You guys should probably go home now."
Wow.
And so came home and just started launching into this year plus of recording and learning a lot more and being in lockdown and having a bit more time and, you know, making bread and doing the whole quarantine thing.
Yeah. So bread baking was one of the outlets for you during this time?
That was more Allison's deal, but I ate the shit out of it. That became one of my hobbies, eating bread.
Yeah, you held up your end of the bargain, so that counts, man.
No, but I've learned a lot in the last little bit, and I think that probably any professional musician who hasn't taken this year and gotten quite a bit better, more knowledgeable, more resourceful about recording has done themselves a big misservice.
For sure. Absolutely. Do you have a home studio, or is it a lockout room at a external joint?
It is a lockout room. I do a little bit of both. So I just will record kind of some more roomy and softer stuff here at home, just because my house is like this weird funky shape with these vaulted ceilings, and I could just put mics in different places and experiment a little more.
Nice.
But as well as like tons of percussion tracks, and if I ever need tambourine and shaker, there's definitely a lot of that going on here.
Yeah.
Or production wise, just some guitar and banjo and different other things here. But then for the louder rock stuff, and then practicing in general, I have a lockout here in town in LA.
Nice, nice. Where
Yeah.
where are you in LA, man?
I'm on the east side, in Los Feliz, right on the Silver Lake line. I live right on the street that is the border there.
Gotcha.
So yeah, there's a lot of great musicians within like half a block of me here that I've kind of discovered over the years and met and been like, oh, you live right there? That's where I live.
That's
Let's get
super cool.
coffee and go on a walkabout some morning.
How far away is your studio? Can you ride a bike to it or walk to it?
Oh, I could definitely. It's probably a 6-minute drive.
Oh wow, nice.
Yeah, and like Mark Stepbro's there. There's a lot of friends there.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
I was looking at some of the artists that you've worked with throughout the years, and I always like talking to people in your position that have worked with both some bigger producers, et cetera, and bigger productions, and worked in pretty big studios, because we could certainly talk infinitely about the advancement of sort of home studios and what we can get away with these days, which is pretty impressive. But as far as some of the cooler studios that you've played in and recorded in, are there any particular rooms that really kind of blew your mind when you were playing in them?
I mean, the obvious one for me is Barefoot Studios, which is no longer Barefoot, but the room is still there. It was previously Crystal Studios, where Stevie Wonder did Songs in the Key of Life,
Wow.
and a bunch of other like kind of historically significant records. But the reason I ended up working there a lot is because of a producer named Eric Valentine, who did Third Eye Blind and Smash Mouth and Queens of the Stone Age.
Nice.
And he's just a wonderful, very close friend. And that all started from playing with Grace Potter, who later became his wife. And to rewind a little bit, that tour was like the craziest time in everyone's life on that bus.
Yeah.
So we were all going through the nuttiest stuff we'd ever been through collectively and individually. So we got off that tour, and I had started dating Allison in secret first in the tour, and then we had become public about it, and we started talking about getting more serious. And I was living in Nashville at the time, so that tour ended. I packed up the Subaru and came out to LA.
Wow.
And so right away, because of Grace, because of Allie, I started working with Eric a lot at Barefoot. And that, to answer your question, that became a really significant spot for me, and a moment, pretty crucial moment in my life that could have gone a couple different ways, and luckily for me went a really great direction. And Eric, God bless him, that guy gave me a chance as
Wow.
the new guy in town, young guy, and like, why not? Let me see about this kid.
That's amazing. When you think about some of the producers that you've worked with, it's something I also like to ask studio session musicians, etc. Working sort of directly with these producers on some of these big productions, are there any particular moments that stick out in your mind as sort of a special learning moment?
Yeah.
And that could be, your own playing, your own way of just conducting yourself, how to communicate anything,
Yeah, I think with Eric specifically, it's that you can't walk into a room and judge the gear by where it is, how it's placed, what it looks like, the condition that it's in. I think to walk into Barefoot Studios back in the day when he was there would be, if it, to the wrong set of eyes, would be like, okay, what is this junky place?
Right.
And to the most musicians here in the know, producers, engineers, they walk in there and go, this is a gold mine. That guitar with the tape all over it and the cracked headstock has been on this record and this record and this record, and it plays like hell, and it feels terrible, but it sounds incredible.
Wow.
And it was the first kind of real round of like, okay, I don't see a mic close to the drum kit. Is he done miking this thing? Oh, he is. He means for that mic to be 20 feet away, and for that maybe to be the only mic in the room. And so, but you'd come back and listen back, and it was right here in your face, so close, feeling so huge.
Wow.
So there's a lot of magic and wizardry, not just in Eric, but in everyone who is a real deal engineer who knows their space. And so I learned a lot about playing a certain way, like say a simple one is like rim shots versus center hits on the
Sure.
snare drum. You have to be able to do both, and it translates differently and is colored differently. And that was kind of a good boot camp for that.
Nice, man. Well, it's funny you mentioned the rim shots versus just hitting the center of it. That seems to be now more than ever, and maybe the last 5+ years or so. That sort of big fat snare drum, sort of center hit, fatter, kind of thuddy kind of snare sound. But still having some articulation. I haven't actually been in on a session where that's been a thing for me to play, but I mess around with it just to get a sense of the acoustics of it and everything.
That is definitely the one. Like I don't use the big fat snare drum stuff very, very rarely, but there's one drum up here. What you're seeing, you know, the podcast won't see this, but up above me, there's a bunch of different snare drums. And the one that I bring, if I'm ever going to bring one drum to a session, it's always the big fat guy.
Yeah.
Because that's just a safe starting point nowadays, because like you said, it's very in fashion to have the thing.
Yep.
That actually started with Grace too. I came onto that gig and she, you know, she was like, you got to tune that snare drum down.
Wow.
And I ended up playing like, you know, these bigger rooms with like a fat snare for the first time and no crack and like no rim shot, and like really just thinking about it sonically much differently than you might.
Right. It's totally. You've got a great picture of yourself playing that Ludwig kit, and it looks like you're playing a Black Beauty. And of course, in looking at that picture in my mind, I was completely imagining just smacking the shit out of it with rim shots, because that's what I want to hear.
That's what I do now. That's what I do now with Train, and we're actually moving into a ringier kind of more live situation.
Yeah, it's just more fun.
It is super fun to play. You can dance a lot more on the drum with that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for that sort of James Brown, Clyde Stubblefield, John Starks, you know, zig with the meters, that cranked rim shot sound and the way that it sat in the mix on those funk records, that's forever seared into my mind, and I just always love that sound. So anytime
Do you feel that because you're from New Orleans, you have to mention the meters in this interview?
I mean, I mentioned
is that in your contract?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it does seem as though everyone is completely obligated to say that, but it is true for sure, and it is definitely kind of like a birthright if you, especially if you play any kind of funk or anything. And I kind of grew up playing some of that stuff. You just have to know the meter songs, because sooner or later you're probably going to end up playing some of those, and there's going to be other drummers and other musicians, and since everybody knows them, you don't want to fuck that up. That's like the one thing, and it's hard. It's hard to play with that feel, man. You know?
Totally. I mean, it's impossible. In my experience, it's impossible to play with that feel. The other night we were cooking, and and I heard that song. We had it on like some sort of like Spotify radio station, and that song, "Clap Your Hand Now." And I was like, "Who is this? I hear this in every movie. I need to see who it is." Sure enough, Meters.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that because I'm an idiot, but also just because like you wouldn't necessarily know it.
Right, man. That's funny. Well, let me ask you about Train. You've been with the band now for a couple years, 2-3 years?
Yeah, 2-3 years, 2.5 years, I think.
Yeah.
My first gig was on my mom's birthday, so I remember that, May 17th.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice. How did you end up with that gig? And was it a crazy, arduous audition process, as it can be with bigger bands sometimes?
You know, it was an audition, but what I do for myself in auditions is, because I'm really bad at it, as I don't think anyone's good at, well, no, there are some people who are good at auditioning, but I'm not one of them. And I think I'm in the majority here. I get nervous and I get, all messed up in the head. And what I do, my big trick is two things. Is I plan something fun for after, and I think it was probably just movie night and dinner with Allie or something.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I do, which is not as nice, is I start going, I hope I don't get this.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, that my real conscious brain is going, I love this stuff. I fucking grew up with this band and I love this music. And I know a lot about it, and I would be I would be perfect for this gig. So there's a little devil and angel on the shoulder thing happening.
Totally.
But I kind of trust the devil a little bit more, just to trick my brain into not giving a shit, not caring as much.
Sure.
So I think if I'm remembering right, I went into that audition with a little bit more of that attitude and like kind of cracking jokes and just being funny. And they are all super funny.
Nice.
And really just like at each other all the time. So that ended up being a good blend right away. And I think that has continued for a couple years now. So I think that's really what the extra little sauce is that gets you the gig or not, reading the room a little bit. And if it's a match, because it could not have been, very easily, but it really was great. So they gave me the time of day, and I'm very happy there. I love this job.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. I was looking on Spotify, as I usually do before these interviews, just to see like how many plays have gone down on any particular song. And I mean, on that biggest hit, I believe, if I read it right, I had to look at it again. I think it was 855 million, which means like that could be a billion plays soon.
Yeah, and I don't know how that translates or what that even means now, but I just know It's a lot.
Right.
Yeah, they're awesome. Like that song goes over great. I mean, Drops of Jupiter. I definitely love that song. There's not one moment that has seemed boring to me, or that we got to play this song again tonight. There's not ever that.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool catalog, and I'm really thrilled to be a part of it.
Nice. Man.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that a bass player friend of mine, Shaben Batacaria. He's an LA guy here. He's now a producer and writer type guy. He's the one, we don't even know each other that well, but he was the one who put my name in the hat for like, I think they might have had like kind of a Usual Suspects LA audition guys showing up. And then Jerry, the MD, Jerry Becker, I think asked Shaben, like, who's like a wild card who you kind of don't know so much about and hasn't been around forever and might be perfect. And I think that's when my name got brought up.
Damn.
So I like being the wild card. That's fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And the tracks guy, Tim Shanehalls, who's a very dear friend of mine, that he does tracks for Train and has had a great musical career previous to that as well. He was playing guitar for Meghan Trainor and a bunch of other people. He gave me the heads up. He gave me a little tip before I showed up. They were playing Heartbreaker by Led Zeppelin. It's a song they go to a lot, and they do a lot of Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, heads up, they're doing Heartbreaker like is on the sheet, but they're kind of seeing if anyone's going into Livin' Lovin' Made after that.
Nice.
And so I listened to it on the way up and just like kind of got my head around it real quick. And by the time Heartbreaker, and then they want that moment where it's yes, exactly. And they look at me, everyone's holding their guitars up, everyone's choked, and they go, did you learn the Live and Love It? And I go, I listened to it on the way up. And they go, where the and we got just go into it. Yeah.
That Live and Love and Made is a tricky song because every other verse is different. And like 1 and 3 are the same, 2 and 4 are the same, but they flip flop. So the accents. I've played in at least 2 different like Led Zeppelin kind of cover bands. So I actually had to delve into that, and it's deceptively from an arrangement standpoint. Whereas like I did Hendrix, for instance, and that's just kind of shredding the Mitch Mitchell stuff, and it's fairly like straightforward, like blues orchestrations
and pretty loose.
But the Zeppelin stuff, like first of all, obviously there's Bonham's Feel, which is its own other world. And
another impossible one to replicate.
It's seemingly impossible, man. And
no one's looking for Matt Musty to do John Bonham, but here we are.
I hear you. They're fun songs to play, man. I tell you that.
Totally. I saw Sadler Vaden the other day tweeted, you can't have Heartbreaker without Livin' Lovin'.
I agree.
Yeah,
you got to play them. When we played Heartbreaker, you got to go into the next one. It's just that's what you got to do.
It's a great moment. Yeah,
absolutely. With some of the gigs that you've played with Train, are there any particular ones that stand out as being really kind of special? And that could be venue, crowd, other country, if that's the case, whatever.
No, none of them. No, there's one that definitely sticks out. We were probably 2 months into a 3-month tour, and we played Jones Beach Amphitheater in New York.
Oh yeah,
in like Wantagh, New York, on Long Island, and that place is special to me, particularly with Train, because about 10 or 11 years prior to that, I was there living in New York. I lived in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn,
Yeah.
and I was playing the like outer stage as people come in to the venue, as like little entertainment music as people would walk into the show.
Hmm.
And that show I played was it was for Train.
Wow.
And so fast forward 10, 11, 12, however many years later, I'm like, wow, this is a trip to be up on this stage where I did the side stage thing, doing the headlining thing.
Absolutely.
That's a real trip. So I made sure to like mark that in my brain because I definitely don't do that often enough. Allie gets on me for not being in that moment and just really focusing on the work and was stressing out about getting it right. And I took a moment and was like, wow, this is cool. This
Yeah.
is full circle in a really cool way and really special to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's another show that comes to mind. We played a venue called Meadowbrook in Guilford, New Hampshire, and our opening song that tour was "Calling All Angels," which was a song that it's probably my favorite Train song, and it just goes over great live, and the recording of it is beautiful, and I just dig that song.
Yeah.
And I remember I had this kind of moment where I knew my parents were in the crowd, my brother was in the crowd, and I had this moment of remembering playing this song and practicing to this song in my living room. And just kind of that kind of all hit me at this moment where we were on stage playing Calling All Angels. And I kind of started getting a little, not, I didn't cry, but I was definitely emotional and vulnerable and a little weepy feeling.
Hmm.
And I decided I can go one of two ways here. I can lean into the emotional side of this, or I can get back to work because I'm probably going to lose the click right now if I
Right.
if I start being really present and in the moment and whatever. So I got back to work, man. I was like, yeah, put that feeling away, and you can talk about it later
Exactly.
with your therapist.
Yeah. Right. How long on average would you say are some of these Train shows, and do you have a warm up routine that's evolved at all, or it's kind of a same, or do you even have one?
I've always had the same warm up routine, which is to the Train shows are 90 minutes, by the
Okay.
way, and I'm hitting hard for 90 minutes. But I think Grace Potter was a great training ground for that because those shows were 2 hours plus
Wow.
and hitting very hard as well.
Yeah.
And I had sized up my sticks and I was just hitting way too hard on those gigs, but still it kind of trained me for this like road physicality versus the studio thing where you come back and you're all fingers, you know.
Right.
Uh, but there is a warm up routine. It's always been the same thing. I have a pad and matched grip. I'll go through the rudiments, just like kind of while listening to music, not necessarily fast, just kind of loose and just like getting blood flowing. And then I'll go backwards, traditional grip, even though I definitely don't play traditional grip at all live.
Yeah.
But I do it just because that's the thing I've always done. And my feet, I'll with Train, there's a warm-up room with some practice amps and a practice kit set up so we can play through arrangements a little bit. I can hit the drums a little bit and just feel kind of loose and warm.
Nice. Awesome, man.
Yeah, so yeah, you definitely get injured if you don't take that seriously on these, you know, these heavier hitting gigs, because you're, at least if you're me, you definitely play with emotion and you know, like you definitely hit harder than you think you are.
Right. Absolutely.
So I've gotten injured I actually got injured at Jones Beach, that show I
Oh,
was
really?
talking about. They brought in a masseuse to like mess with my arm, and it really helped.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was like really close to maybe not playing that show. So
Wow.
I'm glad that I did.
That's wild. Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, I've been playing for 30 years, so there's been little ergonomic adjustments. And just for me, I think I've pretty like elastic sort of wrists, fingers, and elbows and everything else. Ankles, my ankle, I wake up in the morning, it's like I have 100-year-old ankles, you know? So
Really?
oh, dude, my ankles are super fucked up. I mean,
Whoa.
I skateboarded and I played football, and I guess just from like BMXing and just jumping out of trees and doing dumb shit. And I've sprained my ankles multiple times, you know, like just again, doing dumb shit. I jumped over a fence on my birthday to get my cat who had escaped and landed oddly on my left, and I couldn't walk on it. I had to cancel gigs. Like it was my right foot and at the time I didn't do double bass. So my left foot couldn't have gotten me through the gig. But
Right.
yeah, I've had injuries both on the drums, outside of drums, dumb injuries that have affected my ability to play drums, and I've had to cancel gigs. Like
Oh
I've
man.
heard of people playing through injuries, but I've had a couple with my foot, and it was so bad. I mean, I couldn't put a shoe on. I couldn't put any pressure on it. So I think maybe I've just sprained my ankles too many damn times. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm 45. I don't know. Maybe I'm just, this is the age where like all these previous injuries start to resurface.
Probably, yeah. I do a bit of running, and I know that my knees and hips and back and neck have definitely taken a beating from that.
Yeah.
And it's the one form of exercise that makes me happy, and I love doing it. And I have to just like try to run as healthy in as healthy of a way as possible so that I can keep doing it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's good for your brain too, as well
Right.
as your cardio and everything. It's just good for your brain to open up a little bit when you're doing that, just like drumming is,
Sure.
like it expands your world a little bit, makes you think a little differently.
Right.
And running definitely does that for me.
Nice.
So I want to not mess that up, because I don't want to wake up at 50, 60 and have to replace my knees if I can avoid it.
I hear you. I
Yeah.
hear you. Yeah, man. Both of my knees actually, it will like intermittently kind of just get wonky as well. And
Yeah.
not even from doing anything in particular. And I'll have to put a knee brace on. I don't know. I just, maybe my joints, I don't know what's going on, man.
Yeah.
By the way, I saw you you played the two snares. I mentioned your Black Beauty earlier that you sometimes use an Acrolite as well, and
Yeah.
I've got one from the '80s. I don't know if they make the new ones with the internal muffling on it, but I actually love that as an option for like faster decay with snares, especially how they sound under mics.
I have a 90s, the Black Galaxy Sparkle one that
Uh-huh.
has that, and
Yeah.
I dig that. I don't know if I use it very much, but I definitely remember that it's there. And like it's one of those, at least where I'm from, it's like the first drum you get
Right.
when you're learning like snare drum stuff. And
Totally.
man, what a great drum. That's a solid, that's I mentioned like I would bring this one fat drum if it was me bringing one to a session.
Uh-huh.
I will say that the 5x14 Acrolite that I have here, the 90s one, is one of, like, if I'm bringing 3 drums to a session, I'll definitely bring that.
100%. I have two 5x14 Superphonics from '76. Both of them. I got one from '76. I was born in '76. I was like, fuck it, let me get another one, see if they
Yeah.
sound any different. I just kind of tune them differently.
Yeah.
But same thing with those. You pick up those snares and it feels like there's nothing to them.
I know.
Like from a physics standpoint, it almost doesn't make sense that they would be such a go-to recording snare as with the Acrolites.
Right. Oh, totally. I mean, it's such a beast, and like the throw off is stupid and falls apart all
Oh,
the
I
time. But like,
replace those.
I do too. I do too. But yeah, on the train gig, the live setup, it's a left snare. I'm actually trying to slowly get out of that. I'd love to just like, I keep taking pieces away from the kit because I kind of inherited from Drew Scholes, amazing drummer. And I inherited this big, huge, wide kit with 2 floor toms, a bunch of cymbals, electronics, 2 snare drums. And so now I've eliminated a couple of the cymbals, a floor tom, and now I think the next move is to get rid of that side snare and maybe some of the electronics, just to like keep it nice meat and potatoes,
Yeah.
small kit.
Yeah, I hear you.
Because I kind of dig that. I want to be like, in my mind, I want to be Steve Jordan up there playing with
Yeah.
Clapton, just 2 cymbals, 4-piece kit, just groove city.
I hear you. Boy, he is Groove City. My God,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
How many drum sets do you have right now?
Not as many as a lot of guys have. Like it's funny. I have a club date from Ludwig because they're really great to me. I have a club date here in town that kind of just stays here because Allie says it looks good next to the record player.
Okay.
And so it's stacked up. And it is a beautiful drum set and sounds great too.
Nice.
I have a Vistalite that we're taking out this next tour this summer.
Awesome.
And then I inherited from Drew this classic maple white marine pearl or vintage pearl or something. It's beautiful white kit.
Awesome.
That probably, if you were looking at pictures, that was probably the kit that I was on.
Yep, it absolutely is.
Yeah. So and then a couple of different studio kits, a lot of different bass drums and cymbals. And I just bought a US Mercury that lives in Cincinnati because we ended up spending a lot of time there.
Nice.
And so now it lives in this studio in Cincinnati called the Tone Shop.
Cool.
We spent time with Allie's family there during the pandemic.
Yeah.
We actually just drove from LA to Cincinnati, and
Wow.
I actually continued on to New Hampshire, so did the full cross country
Oh, damn.
deal.
Wow.
But yeah, so different kits everywhere, but not millions. Definitely not like I don't have some big storage locker where I have 20 kits.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
definitely have like a handful of really good sounding drums that sound like drums.
Right.
Don't overthink it too much.
Right, right. In learning the back catalog and some of that stuff, was there any aspects of it that you were challenging, maybe more so than you would have anticipated? You know?
Yeah, there's stuff that you have like just in productions and writing and being a part of any recorded music, you have this thing called demoitis.
Yep.
And I found out that I have a lot of demoitis with train stuff that I've listened to for 100 years, that I've loved and grown up with, or just loved for a long time. Meet Virginia, for instance, harder song than you think, than it sounds like it is to play. Drops of Jupiter, same thing. I have these demoitis moments where where the live arrangement now is completely different, and I'm still going to like the record how I remember it and love it. And
Absolutely.
Certain things like that have evolved over a band that's been around for 25 years.
Yeah.
I think if I was playing Meet Virginia for 25 years, I would want a new arrangement of that.
Yeah.
so that's a bit of a challenge, but really not anything other than like really enjoying the work.
Right.
And being able to get into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do y'all do clicks live? Is everything clicked out?
I would say 95% of it has click and some tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially the later stuff. There's a lot of track heavy, more pop songs.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like say the Drops of Jupiter record is definitely more organic and like live musician-y feeling. We just did the 20th anniversary show of that record. We did it at an empty Wiltern theater here in LA.
Nice.
For streaming, and it was so fun to play all that music. But the juxtaposition of that against the newer train stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
Pat puts it in a way that he was miserable writing the Drops of Jupiter record, and he was really happy writing the San Francisco record. So you can hear that.
Right.
But yeah, you can definitely, there's in the production too, the whole thing is a different mood.
Totally.
Yeah, the newer train stuff. Yeah.
It sounds like you have listened to and enjoyed some of like pop music to a certain degree, and I feel like I've been so immersed in like esoteric, obnoxious music and what I've chosen to play and at times listen to, which also drives my wife insane. But do you kind of actively listen to pop music to give you a sense of what is happening in that world necessarily?
I do. It's more because I'm not necessarily a fan of all modern pop music.
Sure.
It is more kind of homework / work feeling than putting on Neil Young.
Sure.
And just having a great evening. But I would say I definitely have taken away elements of modern pop music for the better and have learned a bit from it.
Mm-hmm.
There are moments where I look at the top 20, 40, 100 songs of the day, and I'm like, and I listen down and I go, these are indistinguishable.
Completely.
But there are moments where I'm like, that's a damn good song. The bones of it, it could be produced any certain way. They chose to make it a pop song, but the
Sure.
bones of it, the song itself is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that tends to speak for itself in a musical / timeless sense.
Sure. Absolutely.
So a good song is a good song is a good song. It doesn't matter if it's the Beatles or Drake,
Right. Totally, man. We had mentioned some of the country artists that you've worked with, similar to kind of what I was asking you with working with Train or particular producers. Was it a challenge stepping into that world? Because that's a super kind of straightforward, very minimal style of playing from what I hear with modern country. And it's always kind of been that way, but, especially modern country.
Sure. I have a deep respect for Nashville, the Nashville sound in general.
Yeah, for sure.
I never poo-poo that, because I actually, when I moved to Nashville, I fully expected to like jump into country world and like to me, I grew up with that too. I grew up listening to Garth Brooks and Alan Jackson and Kenny Chesney and a bunch of other people. And I was like, okay, I've been trained for this. I know what I'm about to do. I'm going to move to Nashville and be the greatest country session drummer that ever lived. And I move there, I show up, and the exact opposite happens. I don't even work in country at all. I'm in East Nashville working with indie bands and folk bands and different kind of Lightning 100-ish style bands. And it wasn't until I got to LA that I started doing a bit more of that. And I think that's really where a lot of my sensibilities are musically. And I like, I don't know. I did a double drum gig with Fred Eltringham, who's Sheryl Crow's drummer, but he's also a Nashville ace guy.
Wow.
And to listen to him, Blair Cinta talks about this, to listen to him soloed just the drums with no music, you're like, man, this guy's so basic, meat-handed, like really just simple down the middle. He's not doing anything flashy. This is dumb. But you hear the music and all of a sudden it makes complete sense, and his choices of what to play and what not to play are very, I don't know, very musical to me. I hear it as music once there's some context.
Sure.
And I think there's a real trick to that. I also hear it in Aaron Sterling's playing. A lot of what he chooses not to go for is more of like, okay, I think when I grow up, I want to be like that. Because for me, I would take that opportunity to say something on the drum set and stick a fill there. But Aaron, Fred, all these guys who have been around, they don't. And it's beautiful, because when they do choose their moment, it's the listener has earned it.
Right.
And it's beautiful.
It's funny you mentioned 90s country. My parents listened to it, so I was always like, whatever. And then, eventually kind of I got into more of the Johnny Cash, George Jones, Emmylou Harris, Waylon Jennings, sort of those classic guys, girls, everything in between. And then inevitably when I met my wife, somehow she was a fan of all that stuff. And then she would play it occasionally. I'm like, man, I can't lie. This shit is good. Damn it. Oh, damn it.
You try to be too cool for it, and you're like, man, do you have any Radiohead or Nirvana or something great? And I'm really just not too cool for it. I heard don't ask her on a straight tequila night. The other day, and I was like, oh my God, this is just great. I gotta get back into it. Yeah,
it's funny too as well. And her listening to it, I was like, I'm just gonna listen to like what these drummers were doing as well. And that's kind of what reverts back to what I mentioned earlier about the kind of minimal, straight down the middle. But then again, in the context of what it is, it seems like it's the perfectly musical thing to play.
Oh, and there is a real depth to that. I don't know. It's something I will never disrespect as a drummer.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of music there. That guy Paul Lime, he's like a Nashville legend. He did a lot of those 90s records. I think he did like the Big Dixie Chicks record and a bunch of other stuff. It's just great playing. It's similar to how people view the Matt Chamberlain track on One Headlight by the Wallflowers.
Absolutely.
That was the same time period.
Right.
So I can't help but to think that at least some of the engineering and tuning choices were influenced by that era. But I view those old country tracks kind of like people view Matt Chamberlain's drumming on that song. It's just brilliant and perfect, and you can't imagine it not being exactly what it is now.
Totally. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Matt Chamberlain, especially working with the Wallflowers. Like, that's one of those records I can listen to. I feel like if I happened to find myself in some sort of a session that would resemble that style of music, that kind of Americana folk kind of thing, which I don't have much experience in playing it, I would probably go straight to that Wallflowers record and just obsessively listen to Matt Chamberlain's playing on it. And hope that some of that would filtrate out through my own playing in that session.
It's a golden era, man. There's a lot of great, and I'm nostalgic about it because I'm a millennial, but I definitely, I think there's a lot of timeless music that came out of that period of time.
Yeah. And to revert back to Matt Chamberlain for a minute as well, what's crazy about him is that I didn't know who he was, and he played in this crazy quartet, Critters Buggin', and I saw them multiple times live back in the day. Nice. They would come through New Orleans, and I would see them. And when I saw him, I could not believe how good he was. And that's more of him going off and doing all the things. And you realize he's got chops for days and his pocket for days. Totally. He's just one of the most incredible drummers I've ever heard. And I would just go see him and just completely trip out. And then I heard he was on the Fiona Apple record, and I was like, oh, I love this record. And then I realized, he's a complete killer session guy that happens to play in this like crazy band. And that is how I originally heard him, which is so bizarre.
Totally. And it's bands like that when you realize they're comprised of all those hot shit players.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, they do their day job, and we love that, but it might feel like work to them because it just might.
Yeah.
And they go and do the thing that they love with, Jellyfish or
totally.
Soul Coughing or like
sure.
different bands, more underground bands like that.
Absolutely.
That are just straight amazing music from the soul.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Well, you mentioned Nashville, New York. Now you're in LA. Where'd you grow up, and how'd you end up even playing the drums in the first place?
Little town in New Hampshire, 500 people. Grew up on the farm, milking cows, and with my uncles, and my parents were and are landscapers by day. Wow. And musicians by night. So my dad is a kind of jazz blues guitar player and plays with a lot of great local musicians back home.
Right.
And my mom is a church organist of, I don't know, 40, 50 years now. And so my brother and I would show up to church to turn her pages for her. And we got the hang of the shape of musical notes and why they move a certain way.
Wow.
That was the initial first spark of interest. And then we both started taking piano lessons, which led to my brother taking guitar lessons and me taking drum lessons.
Nice. Did y'all end up jamming together and driving your parents crazy with the music y'all were listening to and playing?
It was really funny. I always wondered, me and my brother would jam. Me and my dad would jam. My brother and my dad would jam. The three of us would jam. And I would always wonder, hey, how come mom doesn't jam?
Yeah.
And I think she looked at me one day and she was just like, I don't jam. And I learned later that she, a legit classically trained musician really doesn't
it's
jam.
Not their world.
It's a complete apples and oranges situation. And because my dream was always being a 90s kid, I was like, I got the sheet music for My Heart Will Go On. And I was like, we're going to take this family band on the road and we're going to be a band. Forget about the farm. Forget about the landscaping business. We're going to go straight to the top and we're going to cover Celine Dion, the song from Titanic. And it's going to be great because I just learned it and I want to show it to you guys.
Right. Oh my God, that's amazing.
And then we're going to have fish sticks for dinner and watch Star Wars.
Exactly. That is wild.
So yes, I did come from a very musical and like very thoughtful and supportive family. So I'm super grateful for that always.
Right. It is interesting though, the apples and oranges aspect of the symphonic music world and then rock or just, any of these other outside genres and whatnot, because I respect their ability to read sheet music at such a high level, but it is more of a world of sort of just reinterpreting or just directly playing what you were visually seeing as opposed to going with just your instincts and trusting that you've put enough shit in your brain and through muscle memory of practice and that, hey, we'll just see where this goes even,
Totally. And like even down to like the studio stuff, I always kind of geek out with my mom over sheet music that she's working on and sheet music and music that I'm working on. So in other words, she's showing me this hymn that she's working on from church and she's reading 4 parts at the same time. And I'm showing her my charting system that's really basic and purposefully that way, really basic, just guidelines, the shape of the song, different moments. If there's a hits that need to be notated, those moments are drawn up, but really you're supposed to be interpreting the song.
Right.
Versus playing a note for note version of a piece of music.
Yeah.
And mom luckily is nice enough not to be like, oh, you're not actually a musician. She's like, no, she's totally like, that's valid and that's your world. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And so I think she at the end of the day she's too polite to be like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Now I can see why you were getting emotional playing and knowing your family was out there in the audience, given the world that you came from, kind of like a rural farm town, farm life thing. And then, here you are playing these massive shows and the whole journey of getting there. That's I could see how that'd be maybe a little emotional.
I was not expecting it, but it really was a special like 13 seconds for me where I was like, "Oh my god, this is actually crazy." And I'm so glad that they're here and we can share this moment. We'll have this forever. Uh okay, shut up and get back to work.
Right, exactly. Oh my God, man. With some of the commercial work that you've done, what is that experience? And then ultimately, like, what with the commercial work that you've done, has it been tied to like any just completely ridiculous products?
Yeah, you must be talking about I did an ad for a perfume,
Okay,
and then one for like a sports, like a European soccer commercial or something.
gotcha.
That has all come. I don't do a ton of that.
Yeah.
I do love it though. I would love to do more of it, but that all came from this composer Sasha Shaban, who I worked on like a horror film for, and maybe another thing. That's kind of stems from the film world a little bit, which
Uh-huh.
I also would love to do more of, but I end up doing a bit of TV and film stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so the advertising stuff is not so much my bag, but I have a really fun time doing it. But it all came from like more TV and film scoring
Gotcha.
gigs. And just like, like anything, it's just who you meet composers and producers and contractors along the way, and they hire you for different things.
Totally.
But that's a really cool world. Of anything, I think I get the most kick out of something I played being on like some TV show. It seems funny, and like
Yeah.
the composers are always like, well, this is stupid, but like, just do whatever you want here. But I think it's so cool, and I put so much weight into something that's on television
Yeah.
in any way. I just get a kick out of it. I think it's because I'm from a small town and I just love it. It throws me.
Right, right. That's
Yeah.
funny. I mean, as far as the most ridiculous commercials, hands down, like consistently throughout time that I've seen, perfume and like fragrance commercials are
Yeah.
so absolutely ridiculous and like certainly in my opinion, I'll speak for myself, indicative of the sort of heightened delusion of the fashion industry. And you watch it and it's just like, what kind of delusional self-importance do you have that you would
Oh
even
my
make
God.
these ridiculous commercials? But that being said, I'll be the first to jump on it if somebody's going to pay me to play on one of them. Hell yeah, I'll do it.
Totally, totally. And it's always this like gladiator, like Russell Crowe,
Yeah.
like massive, like way melodramatic, over the top
Completely.
production, and it has nothing to do with
Nothing
whatever it
to
is.
do with
and
it.
and at the end of it, it goes Sephora.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's just what?
It's
What are you
ridiculous.
talking about? Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
man.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's on
Absolutely.
TV, so I'm going crazy. Going, look at that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Oh my God. I was checking out some of the other bands that you worked with. Is Born Rivals, is that one of your bands?
Born Rivals is two friends of mine. I'm really glad you brought them up because I love those guys. I met them through a mutual producer friend named Kian Reardon, who works in LA, works in town. He works with St. Vincent a lot these days.
Gotcha.
And he was like, hey, you want to come in and do this song? These guys, it's two brothers, Born Rivals,
Yeah.
named John and Paul, of course.
Yeah.
And and it's so funny. Their music is amazing. I don't even know how to describe it, but
I dig it. It's really cool.
it's really cool, and they're brilliant. And they're two of those people who you go in on the session, and if you have siblings, you know about this, but like they finish each other's sentences, and they're 3 clicks ahead of where everyone else is, and then they have to translate to everyone else because they have this other connection going on.
Right.
So those guys, they're brilliant, man. I loved doing those. I haven't heard, I saw them a little bit ago, but haven't heard about doing much more. I hope there's more in the future because I love them. Also, they work with a producer named Andrew Lappin, who works at a studio called Wax Limited here in town. They're a great crew. I
Awesome.
love those guys.
Nice, man. Well, what's going on for 2021? Does Train have any shows that are in the books that are going down?
Yes, they're after all of this, like basically the calendar got moved 1 year.
Yeah.
So a bunch of makeup shows that were supposed to happen last year. We're going out with Vertical Horizon, which is another one of my favorite bands, and we're going out basically August and September, 2 weeks East Coast, 2 weeks West Coast. And I think it's going to be really cool to get back into it again.
Are y'all veering more central by coming through Salt Lake City by any chance?
I don't think so. I think that'll be next year.
Okay.
2022 is a big touring year as far as what I can tell. So I think we'll be out a lot next year.
I'll have to, if you come through, I'll have to catch up with you.
Absolutely. Please do.
Yeah, man. Right on, Matt. Well, it was fun talking to you, man. I appreciate the hang time and all that.
Thank you so much for having me on. And thanks to Craig Mack for putting my name in.
Absolutely. Craig McIntyre, always hooking it up.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to Matt for rapping for an episode. Definitely cool to talk to him about those train gigs and his roots. And really interested to see this documentary when it comes out that his girlfriend did on this resonator synthesizer. I dig the whole concept. We'll catch y'all in the next one. Crash, bang, boom.